$1,200 to kill a Mercedes. I did it without hesitation. The HOA president's luxury vehicle had killed my lawn 14 times. That one summer worse, I was the one being threatened with fines for not keeping my lawn in good condition. But the 15th attempt became an expensive lesson she'll never learn. Where are you watching this video from? Drop a comment below if you had your own neighborhood bullies. I never considered creating a completely legal car trap beneath my grass. But sometimes when fending off a strong Karen, you need plans. B through Z ready. Welcome to the story of how I transformed a typical lawn into the ultimate defense against entitled drivers. 6 months ago, I finally had the American dream home ownership. After years of pinching every penny from my suburban software engineering work, I purchased a tiny corner home in a quiet Florida suburb. The neighborhood felt just so. With its tree-lined streets and neat houses, I spent my first couple weekends fixing up the property, keeping an eye on the front yard. Those hours having spent time gardening with my late father had instilled in me the importance of a tidy lawn. Each plant of grass I placed there appeared to be a small token to him, a connection to memories I cherished. The house was not perfect. The previous owners had neglected some maintenance, and the corner lot provided higher visibility to cars and pedestrians. But it was mine. I'd stay outside in the evenings after work. With earth in my fingerprints delicately bordering the yard, installing solar-powered walkway lights and natural Florida flowers that would thrive under the damp conditions my dad had taught me the exterior of your home was a reflection of you, and I wanted mine to reflect care and concern for the details. The yard, in particularly, was my pet project. A green slate on which I dumped the passion of an artist neighbors would pause to admire my workplace. Appears better than it has in years. An older gentleman taking his corgi out for a stroll addressed me one evening. Good to see someone caring about their property again. These little exchanges made me feel like part of the community. Like I fit in here in this peaceful oasis, where American flags hung on porches and children rode bicycles down peaceful streets. The first few weeks where quiet neighbors welcomed me with a wave, and I felt like I was settling in. Then I met Deborah Thompson. She appeared at my door one Saturday morning with a basket of muffins and a binder. With a practiced smile which didn't quite make it to her eyes, she explained that she was the president of the HOA and local real estate agent who had helped so many families find their forever homes in the neighborhood over the past 15 years. "You really should come join us for the community barbecue next weekend," she said. "Not so much inviting as instructing. It's where all the important neighborhood connections happen," when I explained politely that I had a work deadline. Her smile tightened almost imperceptibly. "Well, I'm sure you'll get around to prioritizing community events. Eventually, we all have to do our part." I thumbed through the binder after she left. Slightly overwhelmed by the 34 pages of regulations covering everything from acceptable mailbox looks to garden gnome's highest point of 12 inches. If you were wondering about something about Deborah's beautifully coiffed face, and the calculating look in her eyes had left me unsettled. There was a manufactured kind of warmth to her niceness that reminded me of sales appearances I had seen during my house search. All facade charm with an unyielding agenda. The real trouble began a week later when Deborah hosted a small party for some HOA committee members. There were a couple of cars parked on the street, including her newly purchased white Mercedes. When the meeting was finished, I watched from the window of my home office as she eased into her upscale sedan, and instead of backing out and turning around again, cut directly across the corner of my yard to allow for a faster exit. Tire tracks dug up my grass, leaving ugly brown ruts behind. I went over to talk to her the next day, being sure to keep a friendly tone. "Hey, Deborah, I noticed that someone drove across my yard yesterday. It ruined some of the new grass that I had planted." Her face never changed. "Oh, that was probably me. It's just the corner of the lawn. Dear, everyone uses that shortcut to make the turn easier. The previous owners never had a concern. Then with a flick of the wrist, just part of living on a corner property. You'll get used to it." I didn't want to get used to it that night. My next-door neighbor, Michael Harrison, stopped by to greet me to the community. A retired military person, now auto repair mechanic. Michael had the weathered look of someone who'd had his share of fights when I related my experience with Deborah. His face clouded. "You've met our resident dictator, I see," he said, leaning on my porch railing. Advice word: don't mess with her. Deborah enjoys making life extremely difficult for those who do not comply. He said he clarified that Deborah exploited the HOA as a personal vehicle with arbitrary rule enforcement to harass individuals who disobeyed her. My ex-wife could not cope with the incessant harassment. After I complained about one of Deborah's ridiculous fines, that was the beginning of the end of our marriage. I asked why other residents did not protest against her. Michael replied that my house held a fairly isolated corner of the block, with few witnesses to Deborah's shortcuts, through her lawn, added to which Deborah had made examples out of past complainers, bombarding them with so many infractions and fines that a few families had ended up moving that evening. I fitted security cameras with sound recording facilities, making sure they caught every detail of my front yard. At least I'll have proof if things were worse, I muttered to myself as I worked with the controls. They did worsen. For the subsequent 3 weeks, my cameras recorded Deborah driving across my lawn no fewer than 8 times on each crossing, creating deeper ruts and killing more grass. I replanted twice only to have my handiwork once again destroyed. I placed a small "please, don't drive on the lawn" sign on the corner. The next morning, my cameras caught Deborah driving up in her car, removing the sign and shoving it into a public trash can a block away. When I came home the next day to pick up my mail, I got an official HOA notice of violation for worn-out lawn conditions, not consistent with those in our neighborhood, with a $50 weekly fine to be continued until repaired. The autograph at the bottom was Deborah's penned with the flair of one who reveled in holding power. That evening, I sat on the steps of my house, gazing at my mangled lawn. The notice of violation wadded up in my hand. Seeing the destroyed grass made me think of crouching at my father's side, as a kid learning how to care for living things. "No one has the right to spoil what we adore, Dad," I reminded myself. With renewed determination, I pulled out the 78-page HOA rulebook and began reading every sentence, scanning for anything that might help me in the defense of my property. I was gladly underlining Section 4.32 on homeowner property rights, when Michael knocked at my door, 2 beers, and a mysterious smile. "Hey, I've got an idea for you to resolve your dilemma. Never heard of landscape impediments?" Michael's concept of landscape impediments was genius in its simplicity. Section 5.9 of HOA bylaws provided that decorative boulders could be permitted as lawn decorations, so long as they were subject to some appearance standards. We spent that Saturday afternoon selecting 3 respectable rocks from the garden shop down the street, placing them in position along my lawn corner. Pretty enough to comply with HOA regulations, but placed perfectly. So no car would have any idea about cutting across here aren't just rocks, Michael informed me as we went quite meticulously, placing the first boulder. A nice piece of granite with wispy blue gay streaks. They're a statement you're establishing limits without breaking rules. We selected rocks big enough to deter the vehicles, but not so big that they looked out of place in a residential area. Each one cost nearly $100. But it looked like a worthwhile investment to protect my property. The installation process took most of Saturday. We dug shallow holes for each rock so it would sit securely, making sure they were half set in the ground for stability. I took detailed photos documenting the placement, measuring distance from property sidewalks and lines to ensure we were meeting all possible regulations. Michael even brought out the neighborhood architectural specifications to ensure we were meeting all aesthetic standards for natural landscaping features. Document everything. Michael explained to us as we did, take photos before, during, and after installation, record the date and time, measure distances from property lines. Deborah will look for any technicality to argue you broke some secret rule. His paranoia was excessive initially, but I would quickly be grateful to him for his caution. The next day placing them up, I noticed Deborah drive slowly past my home. Her face contorted in obvious displeasure. She couldn't complain. Though I had deliberately chosen stones that were much like others that were already being displayed in the vicinity, including her own stone garden ornament feature. But Deborah Thompson wasn't so easily beaten. A week later, I saw one of the rocks had been shifted a few inches from its original place, with fresh scratch marks on its surface. My security camera revealed what had occurred in the early hours of morning. Deborah had arrived with a team of landscapers, yelling very loudly that they were there to give me free lawn mowing as a community HOA service, and the guys mowing my grass. She had them come in and cut all areas in the correct manner for equal cutting, which easily meant running my carefully placed rocks under the guise of professional landscaping. "See how she does it," Michael said. Discussing the video with me, nothing in and of itself illegal, always a possible explanation. The landscapers probably never even knew they were being used as pawns. The video clearly showed Deborah teaching a look of confusion on a worker to just push that rock over a bit so they could properly keep all areas of the lawn. The uniform-clad worker from Green Dreams Landscaping appeared uncomfortable, but took orders from someone he probably thought had authority to provide them. I upgraded my security system with motion-activated floodlights around the border of my yard. Michael assisted me in installing them, chuckling as we calibrated the sensors. "You're going to move up on Deborah's enemies list," he cautioned. "Trust me, she keeps score." He wasn't mistaken. The next week, there was an emergency HOA meeting to debate suggested amendments to the landscape decoration size restrictions, due to safety concerns in the community. I was at the meeting when Deborah avoided eye contact when she proposed restrictions, which would effectively exclude anything large enough to obstruct a car. When my turn to speak came, I reiterated my stance respectfully, including video evidence of repeated lawn destruction. "I'm simply trying to protect my property," I concluded. Seeing some of the neighbors nodding in support, Amanda Williams' attorney and former member of the HOA board recommended table-abling the amendment subject to further consideration, clearly infuriating Deborah, who obviously anticipated immediate approval as the meeting was dispersing. Deborah just pushed past me, her shoulder making a point to bump mine. Later in the evening, my phone rang out with a text message from an unknown sender. "In this area, we have ways of handling with people who do not belong." I reported the incident to local police, who took down my information, but stated that without threats, then there was not much they could do. The next morning brought out the scale. All 3 of my decorative boulders had vanished overnight. My once recovering lawn was now churned into mud, and an official-looking HOA sign stood planted in the middle area under repair. No trespassing. Someone had shifted my security cameras, pointing them away from the lawn. With no video evidence of the perpetrators, I immediately called Amanda and asked her regarding the sign. "The HOA didn't approve any repair signs for your property," she responded, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Be careful, Ryan, they're spying on all of us." The tremble in her voice suggested she knew something more than she was ready to say. Over the phone, I was taking pictures of the damage when Deborah's white Mercedes came slowly by with her window open, and she flashed a syrupy smile. "Oh my, your lawn looks terrible. You have to be careful about getting more fines." I was silent, just continued to take pictures of it. My mom always said, "Never wrestle with a pig, you'll get dirty, and the pig will have fun." She was different in this instance inside me. It was time to stop playing defense and start to fight back. Throughout the course of the ensuing days, I meticulously documented all of it. Every email, every photo, every video clip was placed into a comprehensive file. I created an exhaustive timeline going all the way back to my first meeting with Deborah, chronicling each interaction and incident with precise timestamps. I organized photos in chronological order, showing the growing destruction to my lawn, along with my constant repair efforts. I typed out all relevant conversations caught on tape by my security cameras, highlighting in particular damning remarks. The resulting paperwork jammed a 3-inch binder that I subtitled Property Dispute Evidence and stored in a fireproof safe. A standard of record keeping, which reflected both my software engineer's mindset and my growing realization that this struggle would require detailed records documentation. "Is your best weapon," Michael advised, as we waded through the material together. Deborah is relying on others to become frustrated and jump ship. Most individuals do not have the time to fight step by step. He helped me to identify the most compelling evidence to include in my formal complaint to the HOA Management Corporation, the outside firm that theoretically was in charge of the HOA board's conduct. My report included timestamps, photographs, and video testimony. establishing Deborah's continued trespassing. The complaint was comprised of audio recordings from my security cameras, absolutely capturing her instructions to maintenance staff to move my legally installed landscaping features. Amanda supported my complaint, suggesting an investigation of suspected abuses of HOA authority. Her support was reluctant. She subsequently admitted that she was intimidated by Deborah's retaliation, but could not stand idly by. The harassment continued. "I've been documenting this kind of pattern for years," she explained, while huddled over in a subdued conversation outside the grocery store parking lot, nervously glancing over the shoulder to ensure that no one overheard. "This isn't one-off, it's systematic." Robert Miller, retired neighbor and close friend of Deborah's husband, led the resistance, claiming that I was too sensitive and intrusive. Neighborhood Harmony, the emergency HOA meeting to hear my complaint, was charged. Residents packed the community center, many curious regarding the altercation brewing between the newcomer and longtime HOA president. I presented my evidence in an orderly and composed manner. Several neighbors appeared shocked by the video recordings, muttering among themselves. As they witnessed Deborah's repeated violations, Amanda brought forward the relevant HOA bylaws that protected homeowners' property rights. The board's decision was, but otherwise, a letdown. Too little evidence to show conclusively who had trashed my landscaping features or ruined my lawn. The obvious favoritism left a bad taste. But I wasn't finished. With Michael's help, I installed new security cameras this time, screwed tight into my home siding where they could not be easily deflected. We employed industrial-strength mounting brackets and weatherproof security housings, which would be impossible to remove without power tools. I even installed dummy cameras in convenient locations, while hiding the real ones in less visible places. A trick Michael had picked up in the Army, we replanted the lawn side by side with a couple of neighbors who had witnessed the confrontation and seemed quietly supportive of my insistence on not backing down from Deborah's game. "This isn't all about your lawn anymore," Michael contributed as we worked. "People are tired of being held in her control, but most are too scared to act on it." Deborah's reaction was quick, a flurry of new violation notices for non-compliant front door color and out-of-place garden layout. I responded to each accusation to the letter, based on the rulebook documenting and photographing my compliance. But more notices followed, each for increasingly inane infractions. A trash can left out for 30 minutes. Post-pickup holiday lights taken down one day past the allowed time frame. A small drop of oil on my driveway from a guest's car. "This is how she operates," Michael said one evening. "Death by 1,000 paper cuts. She'll just keep sending citations until you either give up or ride off into the sunset. She's done it to at least 3 families I know of." I advised a lawyer on potential harassment charges, but filing such a case would be in the thousands of dollars, a steep price for what many would view as a minor neighborhood squabble. Things only got worse. However, one night when my motion detectors triggered, the security camera video showed Deborah's Mercedes driving deliberately over my freshly seeded lawn. But this time, her tire caught on something that could not be seen. Causing an instant flat, the camera captured her furious face as she emerged to view the destruction, then grudgingly calling for assistance. When I noticed she was stranded on my property, I hesitated. Half of me did not wish to venture out and abandon her to struggle by herself. Instead, I pulled out my phone and coat filming as I went to lend a hand. I know I could turn my back, I thought to myself. But I was taught to believe in decency. I'll help not because she's worthy of it, but because I am. I wanted to be the bigger person, even as I made certain each second was taped on video. Having car issues, I asked nicely, maintaining my tone neutral as I approached Deborah's face, reddening with anger. Something stabbed through my tire. "I believe you have filled the ground with something intentionally." Her accusing voice echoing out into the night air, caught so beautifully by my phone's recording. "Sorry that happened," I said calmly, sweeping my camera out to show the deep tread marks cutting through my lawn. "But you are driving on private property. This is my lawn and not a road. This is an easement the public has the right to use," she snapped. Although we both realized that was a lie. "I'm going to sue you for totaling my car." I just smiled. "I'd be delighted to call you a tow truck." and I might as well add that my security system records sound too, as well as image. Anything you say now is being taped. Her eyes opened a little before they narrowed again. You think you're so smart when the tow truck arrived to take away her Mercedes? Deborah glared at me with venom. You have no idea who you're messing with. Anderson, she growled softly. I maintained my cool smile. In fact, I do know exactly who I'm dealing with. Mrs. Thompson, and you should know that my cameras don't just record video, they record audio as well. The flicker of doubt in her eyes was thoroughly gratifying. That evening's sleep evaded me as a revolutionary thought crystallized in my mind. If she desired a road through my land so badly, perhaps I could create one that would leave a lasting impression. The idea both exhilarated and unsettled me. Was I truly willing to go so far? The line between mere defense and retaliatory revenge had suddenly become indistinct, and I didn't know on which side of it I was going to end up standing. After sleepless nights over reading local real estate regulations and HOA bylaws, I came across an interesting loophole section. 7.2.1 of the County Building Code allowed residents to install subsurface drainage systems to protect their foundation. And these could, such as metal drainage pipes, placed just below the lawn surface. The more I learned, the more I realized Florida's special drainage needs the state's high water table, and regular heavy rainfall necessitated good drainage to prevent damage to foundations. The County Building Code specifically stated that all residential buildings were required to have proper water diversion systems in place to avoid water entry and foundation damage. In addition, homeowners were actually allowed to install subsurface drainage systems using materials appropriate to their water flow and soil type conditions on their land. This gave homeowners significant autonomy in the layout of these systems. I sat at my kitchen table staring at the print out of the regulation, my coffee going cold. The consideration running through my head was technically legal, but would it be morally reprehensible? Michael caught me still contemplating the question when he stopped by later that day. You are distressed. He observed coming over with a chair. I explained my discovery and the plot emerging. But is it too much? I'd essentially be creating a lawn that would puncture tires when you drive on. Michael considered this carefully. This isn't about entrapping people. It's about legally protecting your property. She has no right speeding across your grass. In the beginning, his perspective was helpful to get me to really think this wasn't revenge. It was about establishing limits that Deborah had repeatedly refused to respect. I took several days to reflect upon the moral implications. Was I resorting to the very thing that I was working to overcome? Some person manipulating loopholes to harm others. The difference seemed to be fundamental. I wasn't going out of my way to hurt anyone's property. I was simply exercising my right to protect my own property, in a way that had consequences only for those who were trespassing. At first, there was a fundamental difference between offense and defense, between attacking someone and defending yourself against their attacking. I thought hard and long before I hired a professional contractor to install a specialized drainage system. The design included rigid metal pipes placed strategically just below a thin layer of soil, particularly at the corner where Deborah cut through. On a regular basis, I provided technical drawings in detail and a foundation report to the HOA and formal notice of the installation, complete with Amanda's verification signature. The contractor, a gruff man named Frank, who had been working in the area for over 20 years, seemed to get the picture without my having to explain much corner lot problems, huh? He said as he absorbed the destroyed lawn. Saw this prior to individuals believing they could travel wherever they wished. He developed a system that was actually effective for drainage, and also achieved my unstated objective with high-grade stainless steel pipes, which would not rust in Florida's damp climate. Deborah and Robert immediately tried to stop the project, claiming it was unnecessary, and would be a negative to the neighborhood. Look, Amanda, getting progressively more assertive in her opposition to Deborah's tactics, pointed out that measures protecting the foundation were explicitly permitted by both county codes and HOA rules. With no legitimate grounds for complaint, the project proceeded. I installed small warning signs reading area with subsurface drainage system, not suitable for vehicle traffic. Perfectly legal and wryly ironic under the conditions while installing Amanda stopped by to ensure conformity with regulations. While we walked along the edge of my property, she discovered that Deborah was also running for city council, using her HOA position to build herself up as an advocate for neighborhood standards. She'd been doing it for years, Amanda explained, causing resident trouble, then later repairing it, so it would seem like a community hero. Most individuals are too scared to approach her with my new knowledge of HOA regulations. I began to notice lots of violations at Deborah's very own home. A fence too higher than permitted unauthorized outside lighting and landscaping that encroached on common grounds. But no notice of violation ever appeared in her mailbox. When my drainage system was complete, I replanted the lawn deliberately, leaving a small patch which was more like a strip at the corner, an enticing target for one accustomed to cutting corners. It did not take long. 3 days after its finishing, my security cameras recorded Deborah's Mercedes. Approaching the corner of my lawn, she braked, gazing over the newly replanted grass, and no doubt the small warning markers. After a split second's hesitation, she turned to drive right across, right on top of the buried drainage pipes. The unmistakable sound of metal scraping against her tire was accompanied by the unmistakable sound of air. Letting out, Deborah leapt out of her vehicle, face contorted in rage. She stormed to my front door, pounding hard, while screaming accusations of knowingly sabotaging her car. When I opened up, phone recording in hand, she demanded that I pay to have her tire fixed and threatened immediate legal action in 30 minutes. Officer Kevin Brown arrived in response to Deborah's appeal. I laid out my documentation in a calm manner. HOA approved properly, posted warning signs, and video proof of her deliberately driving over clearly marked private property. Despite warnings, Officer Brown read through everything, slowly before speaking to Deborah. "Ma'am, I don't see any infraction on Mr. Anderson's behalf. The drainage system is properly documented and approved. The warning signs are legible, and that is private property, not a public road. He designed this intentionally to hurt cars." Deborah insisted loudly. "The system was intended to protect my foundation against water damage as allowed for by county code." I replied, I have no say over the people who come and drive across my lawn, as much clear warnings to do." Otherwise, the officer had a blank face, but I saw the flicker at the corner of his mouth. Maybe the ghost of a stifled smile? "I am not able to take any action against Mr. Anderson. Based on the evidence, if you wish to take civil action, that is up to you." Deborah stormed back to her disabled car phone, clutched to her ear, presumably ringing for another tow service. "This isn't done," she said loudly enough to be heard by neighbors. "You have made a serious mistake." Later on that night, there was a text from Robert. "You have upset the wrong person. You will live to regret this." The threat was unsettling as well as enlightening. It suggested genuine worry on their part that their control was slipping. Michael came to my door after dark. His face darkened. "Just talked to Robert's wife. They are plotting something big about going over all your home purchasing papers. Apparently, they think they found something." My heart dropped when I purchased the house. I hadn't hired a separate attorney, but rather used the closing attorney who was being provided by the real estate company. And guess who had been the listing? Real estate agent on my house. That's right, the estimable Deborah Thompson. The next day, I pulled out all the papers from my home purchase covering my dining room table. The stack was intimidating, nearly 200 pages of legalese disclosure forms and appendices that I had quickly initialed in the closing process. 6 months earlier, I remembered how excited I'd been that day, barely reading the papers as I signed where the closing attorney guided the attorney I now recalled with growing alarm has been recommended by Deborah's real estate firm. My computer science background proved useful as I methodically created a digital index of all the documents cross-referencing words and searching for inconsistencies. I scanned every page into my computer and used optical character recognition software to enable the text to be searched, placing everything into folders by timestamp and category. This systematic approach helped me maintain my mind, focused even in the face of increasing tensions about what I might find. After hours of examination, I found it in Appendix C last page, in microscopic print. An ambiguous provision for access rights, which would read to permit movement across the corner of my property. I read the wording over and over, staring at the words seller reserves. Perpetual access and transition rights along designated channels for community connectivity purposes. The language was cleverly vague, just vague enough to potentially be enforceable, but vague enough that a typical homebuyer would never contest it. I realized I had purchased through a real estate company Deborah had specifically recommended signing standardized documentation without reviewing each appendix. The closing had taken place at her preferred title company with her recommended attorney. I had been so focused on acquiring my dream home that I'd jumped blindly into her cleverly laid trap signing over rights to a portion of my own property. How many more, I thought to myself, thinking about all the neighbors who would have likely gone through the exact same closing process? Was this the way Deborah kept everyone in the entire neighborhood in line, by inserting surreptitious conditions into property titles? I immediately talked to Amanda, who introduced me to a real estate attorney. The attorney, a straight-shooting woman named Patricia, with 20 years of Florida real property law under her belt, came to my home the next day. She wore a sharp navy blue business suit and had a well-worn leather briefcase that suggested she'd had her fair share of real estate fights after reviewing the papers. Patricia confirmed my suspicion. This provision is not legally enforceable. It's in the wrong location, vaguely phrased, and wasn't clearly disclosed or negotiated during buying. She explained that such hidden clauses were a common tactic used by unscrupulous agents, technically on the documents, but deliberately concealed so as not to be detected. "I've seen this kind of thing before," Patricia explained, piercing the clause with her pen. "It's a gray area, legally not precisely fraud, but certainly wrong. The clause is deliberately evasive regarding what established pathways refers to in court. Deborah might argue that the tire tracks over your lawn form an established pathway that predated you buying the place." She shook her head in disgust, but no judge would enforce this. It wasn't clearly stated, it's hidden in an appendix in small letters, and it explicitly contradicts your rights to your property under Florida state law. More disturbing was that we found similar clauses in several other home sale purchase agreements throughout the neighborhood, all represented by Deborah's real estate agency. It appeared she had been inserting these clauses systematically to maintain control over properties long after she had sold them. Before I could decide what to do with this information, Deborah called an emergency HOA meeting to address what she had referred to as my community disruptive behaviors. The meeting notice listed intentionally hazardous landscaping and confrontational behavior toward HOA leadership as the top agenda items. I arrived at the community center, accompanied by my attorney in tow, sensing immediately Deborah's surprise at the presence of professional legal representation. Many residents appeared with curiosity on their faces. Their faces Deborah opened with an introduction to herself as victim to an eye-for-an-eye newcomer, seeking to dilute neighborhood norms. "Mr. Anderson has long violated long-standing neighborhood norms." She explained, sweeping the air dramatically with her arms. "His most recent step puts dangerous metal apparatus under his grass as an intention to hurt guests, and contrary to the sentiment of our neighbors' covenant." Upon my turn for me to give my views to, presented with an overview of the secret property clauses. "Mrs. Thompson has been putting unenforceable access rights on property deeds I illustrated with big copies of the documents she's been using. Her dual roles as HOA president and real estate agent to maintain inappropriate control over private properties she no longer owns." Whispers spread throughout the room as neighbors began reviewing their own documents. Finding the same clause in many of their articles, Amanda had set out a synopsis of relevant property law, clearly illustrating that such concealed clauses were in defiance of state real property laws. Robert attempted to justify Deborah claiming the clauses were ordinary practice and within the better interests of harmony within the community. Michael countered by reminding everyone Robert's own fence dispute from last year, in which Deborah had used similar methodology to force him to relocate a fence at considerable personal expense. "This isn't a matter of community norms." Michael clarified his tone with authority drawn from his military background. "This is a matter of one person, bending regulations for personal benefit and punishing anyone who crosses her. Another authority figure this session descended into chaos as a number of residents began sharing their own accounts of intimidation and selective enforcement of rules. Deborah once again attempted to reassert control, but the tide had clearly turned. There were a number of board members who publicly demanded a vote of no confidence in her leadership. Making it plain that evening, I felt a sense of vindication and trepidation. Something told me Deborah would not relinquish her power without a last desperate counterattack. My instinct proved correct around 2 a.m. My security system notified me of movement outside the video, showed a few dark figures coming towards my house with what appeared to be spray cans and tools. I immediately called the police and turned on my exterior floodlights, and the attempted vandals scattered into the night the morning broke their failed exploit. My car had been partially spray painted with the letters HOA hater. Before they were surprised, Officer Brown did take a report and photographs. But without positive facial recognition, there wasn't much hope of prosecution, because I was washing the paint off my vehicle, Amanda called with troubling news. Deborah has spoken, talked. The HOA executive committee into conducting a special thorough inspection of your residence next week, she warned. Going to cite you for any offense, however small she's telling people in private that she'll make you sell. I sat on my front porch that evening, staring at my property-scarred car, feeling the burn of exhaustion. Was this house such a hassle? Was it worth it? Should I just sell and go somewhere else? Michael sat down next to me, placing a reassuring hand on my shoulder. You can't quit now, Ryan, he said firmly. This isn't about you anymore. If Deborah wins this and becomes a city council member, things will only get worse for everyone. We need a new plan, one that Deborah would never expect. He took his phone, displaying to me a social media group page named Victims of Thompson HOA Share Your Story. The group already had dozens of members, all with the same tales of intimidation and abuse. Michael and I employed the next week developing our anonymous web presence, obtaining endorsements from current and former residents who had been the target of Deborah's practices. The response was astounding, not only from our neighborhood, but from 2 previous neighborhoods where Deborah was HOA president prior to moving into our subdivision. Amanda diplomatically provided internal reports that showed patterns of selective enforcement and questionable financial choices during Deborah's tenure. Small inconsistencies in the HOA ledgers raised troubling questions regarding where certain funds had been allocated. I've been monitoring for years, Amanda conceded. I just never had the courage to speak out on my own. I've witnessed what happens to those who get in her way. As the scheduled inspection of my home approached, we had an unofficial community meeting to discuss the future of our neighborhood. Michael supplied his yard as an impartial location, and word got around spread by hushed words and confidential messages. Deborah located our online social media group within a few minutes, mailing me a certified letter to threaten a lawsuit for defamation, and slander, the artfully prepared letter from her attorney, demanded instant elimination of all libelous and malicious comments and public apology. My attorney replied that valid accounts of fact were constitutionally safeguarded, and that all records were supported by tangible evidence. The legal tangle persisted as every side recognized that possible stakes hovered far beyond area politics and professional reputation to Deborah's real estate license. In the meantime, Robert and some diehards began 24-hour surveillance of my residence, documenting with camera every possible rule violation. A garden hose unspooled an hour. A newspaper never reported soon a rather overgrown hedge. The psychological warfare was clearly intended to make daily life unbearable with the inspection looming over us. We accelerated our plans. I approached a few local journalists with an offer of a story on HOA abuse and real estate interest conflicts. 2 journalists indicated they were interested particularly when shown evidence of the covert property clauses and selective enforcement patterns. Amanda warned me that Deborah was preparing documents to force a distress sale of my house because of alleged repeated and severe infractions made me ineligible for additional residency in the community. Thus, extreme steps involved extensive evidence which justified the meticulous inspection of my house. The inspection date arrived with military precision. Deborah led a 5-person team that included Robert and a private building inspector. whom she had hired specifically on grounds of structural safety concerns that somehow hadn't been an issue during my purchase 6 months earlier. The inspection was grueling with Deborah's team, documenting dozens of minor issues. A loose gutter fastener, slightly faded trim paint, a hairline crack in a sidewalk paver. The building inspector seemed uncomfortable with the excessive scrutiny, but continued his examination under Deborah's watchful eye. As the inspection concluded, there was a commotion at the street. 2 news vans had come, reporters and photographers recording the entire spectacle. Deborah had appeared for a moment, flustered, clearly, unprepared for the limelight. One investigative reporter approached the building inspector with demanding questions about his working relationship with Deborah's real estate company. The inspector's nervous squirming and deflective answers drew the attention of everyone present. The reporter reported that she had discovered the inspector had received significant payments from firms connected with Deborah's business activities in the past. As tensions escalated, I played my next card audio tapes, catching Robert advising the inspector to find whatever it takes to kick Anderson out regardless of true conditions. The recording had been made during a pre-inspection conference Michael had managed to attend as a concerned, impartial neighbor. The building inspector, under professional scrutiny and potential ethical violations, refused to sign Deborah's overly punitive inspection report. But I received notice of a $5,000 fine for accumulated offenses the next day, with a 10-day grace period to correct everything or face eviction action. I had the notice of offense reading like I was signing a death warrant against my home ownership dream. But glancing up, I saw Michael smiling confidently, Amanda nodding seriously, and behind them nearly 20 neighbors' residents. Individuals who had quietly endured Deborah's dictatorship far too long were already ready for the community meeting? Michael asked. I nodded, seeing that this was to be the final play of the evening. Since I was about to prepare for the meeting, I received a text message from an unfamiliar number. I'm Deborah's personal aide. She has documents on you that you don't know exist. Meet me at the downtown coffee shop 8 tomorrow morning. The downtown coffee shop was busy with morning commute traffic. When I arrived, Jessica, Deborah's assistant, was already seated, nervously looking at her watch. She spoke quickly, keeping her voice low. I've worked for Deborah 3 years. What's she's doing to you? She batted a flash drive across the table. This has emails and spreadsheets outlining her long-term scheme to devalue certain properties via HOA harassment, then purchase them up below market value. Through shell companies, the records revealed a scheme of sophistication Deborah would prey on homes, with certain types corner lots, like mine homes, with older owners in the process of weighing whether to downsize or families experiencing economic distress. She would coordinate HOA complaints on these homes incrementally, building up pressure until owners sold at reduced prices to evade the harassment. Her real estate company would facilitate these distressed sales, frequently to limited liability companies, which, on closer examination, lead back to Deborah's husband or business associates. She's going to sell your house as soon as she gets you out. Jessica indicated that she already has buyers in the pipeline who will give $30,000 above what you originally paid. The drainage system complication pushed her to desperation. She started making mistakes because you're pushing back with this bombshell information. I visited Michael's house that evening for our community meeting. Over 40 residents showed up besides the local reporters who had covered the inspection. Amanda had finally made up her mind to stand with us publicly at the risk of her professional image in the community, but not ready to remain silent anymore. Deborah and Robert appeared halfway through the meeting, attempting to sabotage proceedings by calling it an unauthorized meeting. That was contrary to HOA overrule. The residents, who were the numbers and media voice empowered, rejected their concerns. I presented the evidence methodically, like Jessica's accounts documenting the pattern of property manipulation. Predicted spreadsheets disclosed revenues from dozens of distressed sales. Audible gasps filled the air victims who'd been harmed. Related their experiences. Families who'd lost thousands in coercive rapid sales seniors, bullied into selling homes they'd owned for decades. New arrivals priced out before they'd had time to establish themselves. Robert, clearly shaken by mounting evidence, suddenly defected. I was unaware of the flipping of properties. He confessed, his voice tense. She informed me we were merely enforcing neighborhood standards. He disclosed that Deborah had promised him backing for a position on her upcoming council staff. If he continued to assist in enforcing her HOA agenda, Deborah flatly denied it, threatening lawsuits against all in her circle for character assassination. But her typically authoritative demeanor had deflated her, her eyes darting around the room as former friends distanced themselves from her local reporters, began to ask difficult questions about relationships between her real estate firm and city politicians, about tax returns on the various shell companies, and about ethics of simultaneously serving as HOA president and the area's dominant real estate agent. Amanda reported findings of her own in-house audit of the HOA's finances, with numerous unexplained expenditures and accounting irregularities while Deborah has been on the board. These accounting discrepancies total over $30,000 in the past 2 years alone, she told the reporters present at the meeting. Things came to a boiling point when Officer Brown walked in, saying he had taken several formal complaints and had to take statements regarding accusations of fraud harassment and misappropriation of HOA funds. Deborah attempted to leave, claiming she needed to talk to her attorney. "I'll need your statement now." Mrs. Thompson, Officer Brown was firm. "These are serious charges that must be dealt with immediately." Cornered and flustered, Deborah lost her tidily maintained composure. "I built this neighborhood," she thundered, her voice breaking. "None of you would have done anything when I was president." "You ungrateful people." Her rant was captured on several cell phones, the final nail in her reputation coffin. The HOA members present held an unplanned vote removing Deborah from office by a landslide. Robert abstained, his face a mix of shame and relief. The aftermath unfolded over the next few months. Amanda was voted in as interim HOA president, making immediate changes to bring transparency and reform. The most punitive regulations, Deborah was confronted with investigation by local authorities and the real estate licensing board of her business practices. All fines against me were lifted with compensation. Granted for the lawn damage and harassment, the community held a neighborhood barbecue on my newly restored front lawn, complete with a tongue-in-cheek sign that said, "HOA-approved lawn may or may not contain spikes." Robert came up to me during the party and extended a genuine apology. "I let myself be manipulated for years," he admitted, explaining he would be selling his house and moving to be nearer to his daughter in a different state. Sometimes you need to start over. One night, several weeks later, I sat on my porch as the sun dipped behind me, casting golden light on my now lush lawn. Deborah's white Mercedes passed by one last time, loaded with belongings. As she permanently left the neighborhood, Michael invited me over, offering me a beer and an official document notice that Deborah had withdrawn from the city council race. "You know," Michael said thoughtfully, "I think we should propose a new HOA rule about naming neighborhood streets. Maybe we should name the corner in front of your house Karen's Folly Lane." I laughed and raised my bottle in a toast to well-manicured lawns and quiet neighborhoods. Two things no Karen can ever take away. Amanda lost by later grasping a campaign flyer she'd been given by Deborah's new neighborhood on the opposite side of town. "If we warn them," she asked, half serious. I grinned. "Maybe they'll learn installing drainage spikes faster than we did." And that, friends, is how I transformed a lawn war into a lesson I will never forget. For an HOA, Karen Deborah has moved to a new city, now reportedly living in a rented house with no yard for her to drive over those drainage spikes. I removed most of them after everything settled, keeping only a small section. As a reminder, they were just proper water drainage per HOA rules. After all, weren't they? Amanda has done a wonderful job as HOA president, turning rules from instruments of terror into actual rules for making a better neighborhood. And if there are any Karens out there watching this video thinking about making their HOA their personal thief, remember, sometimes the quietest lawns have the sharpest spikes. This is Ryan Anderson, the guy who turned Karen's lawn. Karen's lesson: hey, drop a comment below. If you've had your own experience with an HOA, Karen, I know I'm not the only.